Welcome to episode 22 of the Bithell Games Podcast. I'm Alexander Slawinski.
And I believe I'm Mike Bithell.
Each week we talk games, what it's like to make games, and the random stuff we don't generally find time to talk about because we are playing and or making games. Our guests this week are Alex Schwartz and Devin Reimer, CEO and CTO of Owlchemy Labs, respectively, creators of the buzzworthy Job Simulator for your VR platforms. Hi, guys.
Hey, hello. Thanks for having us.
I like the word buzzworthy. That's good, Alexander.
It is buzzworthy.
It has buzz, and it is worth that buzz.
Is it hype-worthy?
Buzzworthy. Yeah, exactly. It's good. I like it.
Actually, we'll get into that. So some show notes. If you're living in the Sony Europe territories, volume is currently deeply discounted. Remember that if you pick up volume on PlayStation platforms, it grants you access to both the PS4 and PS Vita versions, along with the upcoming PlayStation exclusive Volume Coda for PlayStation VR. Thank you again for everyone leaving iTunes user reviews. Appreciative of the 5 stars and the lovely reviews. We've seen a 100% increase in listeners over the past couple of weeks, so that's
we have
a big
2 listeners now?
Yes, I know. Amazing. It's very exciting.
My mum must have started. That's awesome.
And your sister.
Oh, my sister. That's good.
And so that's a big part. Thank you to everyone who's been talking about the show. Appreciate that. And on one final note, E3 is next week, which is the industry's biggest show of the year. We will be recording our normal episode later this week, but don't be surprised if you get a couple bonus episodes at no extra cost during E3 week. Mike and I will probably do a wrap-up of the 5 press conferences. There's still time, EA and Ubisoft, to get us those tickets.
Wait a minute, we haven't got an invite to the Ubisoft press conference. I'm not going to be there for Watch Dogs 2's announcement.
We're on the wait list.
Oh, Alexander.
And I know.
You're slipping.
I failed. And then we've got a week of who knows what we're going to be doing. So we'll try to get another episode out of that. All right, guests. Hi, Alex. Hi, Devin. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've been up to in the VR space.
Virtual reality. Yep. I just dropped the mic. You couldn't see it. That's it.
That's good.
Yeah, no, that's been our bread and butter for the past, it's like 2 years now. Yep. Back when everyone told us we were batshit insane for even doing any virtual reality stuff. And now we
so you're not just ahead of the curve, you're kind of like you're designing the curve as you go around it.
That's why we need that gif. There's the Wallace and Gromit gif of laying the tracks on the front of the train while the train's moving. Yes. That's what VR development feels like right now.
Very much so.
Yeah, I mean, and you guys, I remember Dev Days, like Steam Dev Days, like how long ago was that? Like 2 or 3 years ago I watched a talk from you, I think.
That was 2014, like summer or fall?
So, I think it was early. I think it might be
was
the spring.
Early 2014?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that was very, very early VR.
That was a great lineup with Abrash talking about his future predictions of what consumer VR would be, down to a T, like resolution, the optics, the frame rate, everything. It was that here's what it's going to be, and that's basically the Vive specs. Yeah.
Yep.
So now that the first sort of consumer devices are out there and Job Simulator is out there, what has it been like now that VR is no longer a developer conversation? It is a customer, player, consumer, whatever term we want to use conversation.
Well, first is we sound slightly less crazy to a larger group of people, because it used to be this, like, there were 30 or 40 people who understood a couple of weird paradigms that we were experiencing, and now people are, coming back to us and saying, wait, I remember you talking about this, and I just felt that exact thing in room scale VR, or, it.
Yeah, like I use a benchmark at conferences. I tell people that, we only do VR games. And then the amount of people calling us crazy is just going down over time, which is great. It means we kind of picked the right path there. So, yeah.
Well, you've also made. I've go on about it on Twitter quite a bit. I genuinely, Job Simulator is my favorite VR game, and I think it's a lot of people's kind of. It is acting quite well as I think a lot of people's first or second VR experience, isn't it? And I guess that's because you started so early that you were set up to do that and to be there. Right at the start.
Yeah, and we were very cognizant over the fact that we knew that early in VR, like the person that actually buys the physical headset and buys the game, that's going to be like 10% of the people that are actually going to play Job Simulator. Because people buy the Vive, right, and get Job Simulator, they're going to invite at least 9 to 10 friends over to try it, right? And so we had to make sure that we built a game that people could instantly pick up and play with no tutorialization or any of that stuff. So
yeah, and with all that stuff that you can discover, that then, you know, when I've had friends over to play on the Vive, they'll be playing, I'll be like, throw a paper airplane at that robot, you know, just do it, and it's stuff like that, and that gives that room based fun to it. That kind of experience is great.
Right, that was like, we need to have a game that doesn't need a tutorial, or that the tutorial's so thin that once you pick up the first item, you know what to do. And so it's funny, like, if you have a more complicated VR game and you want to just pass and play to someone, you go through the spiel, you're like, okay, this button did this, and you hold this to teleport, but don't let go too early, and you gotta do... And, like, it's funny, you're talking about, like, telling people, throw this here, eat this item. It's like, when people don't have anything that they need to say, it's just like, here's the controllers, just go for it. They start shouting things that they want them to do, which is funny. Like when you do like in-person QA, you have to really hold back and bite your tongue and say, like, I really want them to eat that trash donut right now and vomit, but I'm not going to say anything. We find that when other people demo, it's just they're just blasting information at them, whether they can hear them or whether they care or not. They're like, do this, pick this up, copy a thing. And you're like, I just want to look around.
I think the thing that most impresses me actually with the design of Job Simulator is, and I'm interested in like what the process was there, is it does one of those things that game designers are often terrified of doing, which is creating logical interactions between objects and kind of real world reactions. So my anecdote on this is my father-in-law came over to play on some VR, and he's in IT, he's a computer guy, but he hadn't played much VR. So I put him on Job Simulator, and he was in the office level, and he found the coffee machine, and he was pouring coffee, and he was enjoying the fact that the level of the coffee was raising. And he pulled the coffee cup out to see if it spilled, and it did. And then he tipped the cup, and he saw some fall out, and he was like, "That's great." And he tipped. And it kept working for him, and he was trying to break it basically. And the thing he did that broke it was he tried to pour coffee into the creamer, I think, and it didn't create like a bit of coffee in the creamer or whatever. But that the fact the game invited, and frankly, you know, if he hadn't been such a pedant, probably would have completely managed to kind of best him in his attempts. That seems really brave to me. That's something that you don't see in many games, and I'm interested, like, was that really tough to design, or is it one of those problems that designers think is much bigger deal than it actually is?
It's the toughest problem I've ever encountered in RPG development. It has been one of those things that as soon as we add one system, what people do is they abstract from that, right? As soon as you're like, oh, I want to have a cup of coffee, like we could have done the traditional thing they do in games where it's just like they have a mesh
press
and it
this
just goes
button
up
to make a cup.
and it's done, right? You tilt the cup, nothing happens, right? And it's just like flat. But as soon as you have that, then there's expectations, and then you add systems to support those expectations, which then causes more expectations, and then you kind of got in this cycle, and you gotta be very cognizant of what you're putting in and what what the affordances are of a situation.
That's what led to that awesome. There was like an Upload VR interview we did. Is called like why it took us 8 months to make a good cup of coffee in Job Simulator. It's just all about recreating real world systems because a user tried to do something that they expected should work. And then we go, it looks like we need a heat transfer system now. And, it looks like we need a this system and a that system. And you end up writing kind of the core systems of the world and interaction.
So it's like a holodeck in 2 years, right? Like that's the plan.
Right,
yeah, the joke is that we decided to build the universe as the first big forte.
Yeah, exactly. Like, just do a kart racer. Just do something simple. But no, let's build causality in a real world environment. That's great.
Yeah, and
so I want to ask this question separately of the two of you, Devin and Alex. I want to start with, what do you think VR gaming is right now? And what do you think it is 3 years from now? So considering you're the ones, like you said, Wallace and Gromit, laying the tracks and trying to figure this out. And we will absolutely get to at some point in this conversation about the things that you see that are working out there and things that you consider to be potentially problematic, because we're with everyone starting to run at VR with all these different ideas from all these different genres, we're seeing, we've brought it up on the show, we've seen problems from potentially like horror games. And we've seen, things like Job Simulator that are very much designed to onboard people, get them understanding what's going on. So Devin, let's start with you. Where do you think VR is right now? Like what do you think is the best use of it right now? And where do you see Owlchemy going with it in the next 2 to 3 years?
So right now, games seem to be like the thing that works fantastic in VR. That is going to change, I think, pretty rapidly as more people that have some knowledge in games start branching out into other fields. Unlike anything else in the past, we're going to have game developers in tons of industries doing work because, like, to build VR stuff, you need to be a game developer at heart because essentially the core of being a game developer is understanding how a user is going to interact with complex systems and how to design things accordingly. And that's how all VR works. You can't make any VR application that doesn't have that. And that's why things like, in my opinion, like things like 360 video is Hollywood's take without a game developer trying to do VR, and it is going to fall on its face pretty horribly. But as soon as Hollywood starts understanding that you got to take some of these practices and things that we've learned as game developers and apply them to that will start working.
Yep.
Alex? Oh, sorry. Did Devin answer the 3 years from now version? No. Give me the 3 years from now version.
We
Devin.
overlap on a lot of those things. I think there's like 7 or 8 core things that we think are going to change. For like what's coming first. I would love to grab multi-user. That's clearly a thing that's going to happen. But I don't know if you can take another one. We have a couple predictions on
social is going to be pretty huge. There's an incorrect thought that a lot of people have that VR is kind of like a solo experience, a thing that you're by yourself. So social is going to take that over. But one area in which I think is going to surprise a lot of people is feeling like you're in a space with others when there isn't actually others there at all. Yeah. We learned very early on with Job Simulator was simply having bots come over and talk to you and tell you things was really, really awesome. In the very early parts of Job Simulator, in the first demo, there was our job bot, and he kind of stood across from you, and he said a few quirky lines. And then as we kept developing the game, we wanted more lines, and then we're like, oh, it'd be really cool if we had some other bots. And then it became this whole other system with all these bots interacting with you and coming across. And that felt great, and it turned a very isolating experience into not that. It actually feels like the world is very alive.
Yeah. I mean, to go continue down that path, it's... there's something magical about seeing the virtual representation of an actual human on the other end of a system. So only with having a left hand, a right hand, and a head being represented, our brains are just hard-coded deep down to be able to extrapolate and pull together the rest of the human form and understand that that's an actual person on the other end. And conveying emotion and empathy and understanding that the intent of the person behind just those 3 moving boxes is absolutely incredible. So for multi-user, same space, or feeling like you're in the same space, but you're actually remotely separated. Interactions, kind of like I want to just stand in the same room and talk to you, or whiteboard something, or concept something, or show you something. The early tests and early things that we've seen in that blow my mind as to how amazing it can feel to just stand there with someone. And the other part of that is that before we have that deep kind of like a perfect Skype of VR where I can go and just have remote workers pretty much come, instead of Skyping, just be in VR with me and show me things. The big problem that we're having, again, with social and representing people is that when you look at someone who's playing a VR game today, they look like that hype, I think, came out of the fact that you just see a person wearing a plastic thing strapped to their face, flailing around and screaming about how amazing their experience is, but from the outside it just looks like magic, right? And so we're trying to, with the spectator mode, being able to have a camera mounted in the corner to show you kind of where you are in the world, and also with mixed reality and showing people overlaid inside of a 3D scene. It's starting to allow people who haven't yet been able to have that first amazing high-end experience, which is the large percentage of the population of the world, to understand why people are freaking out so much about being in these virtual spaces. And so we're trying to build some tech and make some advancements in that to show people and to have them understand why is it that we're saying that this is a life-changing, crazy experience. So I think conveying that to more people over time is kind of a big challenge and a big goal that we have.
So Alex, in terms of Owlchemy over the next few years and the things that you're mentioning, is that still games? Is that still game development, or are you transitioning into something else? Like, is Owlchemy still a game studio, or is it a VR studio that happens to do games?
I think the line is blurred, and what's important to us is staying agile enough so that so our passions right now are clearly in games and virtual reality and where they overlap. But a lot of times you go down a path and you're, again, either laying that track or cutting through this jungle and you don't really see more than a foot ahead. And we might see something where we go, this can change the future of every industry in the VR space, and this tool is absolutely needed for everyone. Let's go and make sure that everyone has the ability to do that to speed up the advancement of VR for the world. And so I think games will lead us to wherever we're going, but I don't know where that end result is, and whether there's a singular end result or whether it's 10, 20, 30 different kind of forms of pieces of content and tools and experiences and kind of ways to help facilitate others building and creating content and experiencing content. Yeah, I mean, like, we have people call us up and say, I played your silly satire video game, but I realized that when I use those controllers and they're so accurate, I could be doing heart surgery. And so how do we apply what you did to something in a completely different field? And so the UX research and like the psychology of what we're kind of uncovering about how people perceive their hand interactions and how they like highlight states and liquid simulation, all these things, they're not game specific necessarily. They're being applied to games, but who knows where that might end up being used.
But if you're doing all this VR cutting edge stuff, I mean, are you starting to veer towards, essentially, has the military shown up at your door?
If they
hey guys,
for unrelated reasons.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the great thing about games is that there is so much we don't yet know, and it is so ripe for continuing to innovate. And that is why it's like our focus right now. It's just like it's so amazing to be able to, like, Job Simulator. Someone joked, they're like, "What genre is Job Simulator?" And there was a group of indies around, and we're like,
yeah,
we literally don't know. And then we had to riff on what the genre of the game was. And at that time, it was launching in like a month. And it was like, that just didn't even occur to us because we were building a thing that worked the greatest in VR. And that's like the most exciting thing for me is like that 3-year question is, what new genres have we not even thought about yet because they haven't been possible that will all of a sudden become possible and be big? Because I'm not convinced it's existing genres that are going to be the really big thing in VR.
Yeah, that's part of my big fear of people's strategies, flawed strategies, and you mentioned film and Hollywood, is to apply previous ideologies to a new medium like you would when you get a slightly different console or a slightly different input device and you go, okay, how do we take the things that we knew made money in this specific space and just make them work over here? And I think that's the film world's failing, is to say, yeah, clearly a director is for 100 years has directed your gaze to see what they want you to see, and that's no longer the case, right? So when it comes to film, it's like you should be asking yourself, how can you experience a story in a new way, more like theater in the round, when you have the ability to just kind of perceive it in your own way. But we see that all the time. I mean, we had slides in our first deck about like showing like Street Fighter on an iPhone, right? Like with 7 virtual buttons slapped on the screen. The game industry does that a lot in the beginning. Is they take a new medium, they don't understand what's good about it, they don't build for that platform, they just apply something that existed to it and then realize its failings. And with Job Simulator, we were able to actually start from the ground up and say, why don't we just see what is fun and what's not fun and what works here and what doesn't work, and then build from that, which meant that we did need to invent the universe to do coffee, but it was a worthwhile endeavor.
Yeah, and it's not just game development. Like, it's just kind of way humans work. Like, when film started to become a thing, the first thing that people did was they pointed cameras at stage plays. which literally makes no sense. And that's where some VR is right now. It's like, how can we point our camera at a stage play? The great thing about the team that we've built here is we're not afraid to throw away everything that we have done in the past, every thought that we've had, every concept that seemed to have worked in the past, and just try different things and see what actually works in VR and what sticks. The worst thing you can do is assume that something that has always worked will continue to work.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So you've sort of referenced the stuff that I had mentioned earlier, and I figure this is with the time that we have left to touch upon the things that you've seen that are using VR really well, and the concerns that you are starting to see bubble up from the VR community and development community. I'll sort of kick this one off first with looking at something like Job Simulator. Is it hardcore enough? Like, is it enough to get a gamer audience to be interested in VR? Or does the gamer audience want something that elevates their heart rate, that is gamier? Like, is it too much of an experience and not enough of a game?
Yeah. I have like a floaty kind of artsy response to the gamer audience question, which is kind of the antithesis to a business decision, which is VR has made content consumption more accessible than it's ever been in the history of all mediums, interactive mediums. And so like that slide that we had that has a 360 controller with its 17 buttons, kind of all converging to the singular motion control, right? Like there's nothing intimidating about using motion controls. We've been training our entire lives to reach out and pick up things in VR or in real life, so it just works in VR. And so there's a whole new audience that it falls outside of this gamer realm that never would have picked up a controller and played kind of a video game because of the levels of abstraction that you need to get used to when you take on something that is usually found under the video game header. And so the question of should we build something more hardcore for a hardcore audience, you might have a response, which is maybe the audience is changing, and to just kind of build in a direction of what works with this high accessibility, is another way to go, and hope that the audience kind of forms around that.
Yeah, and so like the gamer, even the word gamer, the reason it exists is because it's a niche. When you think about the amount of people in the world, and I think VR, because it's going to become a thing that you're going to use, games is not going to be the only thing that people are going to buy VR for. That's actually going to become a smaller part of it as people buy it for work and buy it for all these things, and then they're just going to be interacting with content on it.
That being said, our first generation thoughts on where we should build content and how we should build it was we need to show people that this hardware is freaking amazing, and build from the ground up for motion controls and being able to move within a confined space and all that, and also build for pass and play, build for short consumable experiences that don't necessarily have intense replay value, but sacrifice a bit of that for the zero onboarding, no tutorial, perfectly simple kind of onboarding. Now, I think Generation 2, basically, Rev 2 of year 2 of VR, I think we need to start focusing on things that bring people back in a more regular fashion, something with a more creative element, something that you can dive deeper into and that you can explore systems on a deeper level. And so that's kind of our theory, is that we need to, for game number 2, that's kind of the direction that we're going to be going.
Yeah, like so our game, the thought is our games are going to grow with the market, right? So as more people have tried VR and become comfortable with VR, now we can do some new and interesting things on that platform. It'd be like designing like a 360 or an Xbox One game right now, right? And if you had designed that back when the Super Nintendo was out, and then you just hand them that controller, people would fall on their face, right? Twin sticks are really, really complicated to use, right? And the reason that worked was like that progression. As people got more comfortable with platforms, you could do more intense things. And that's kind of the same way that we're thinking, is as people get more comfortable with VR and have had a variety of experiences, now we can kind of build on that layer and kind of move that up that way.
Especially when you're inventing the interface paradigms and motion input paradigms. Like, it was possible that everyone the launch titles would have a different method of interacting, and so you don't want to vary too extremely and come up with some magic system that all 30 of the initial games have different learning curves. So it's like now we've seen the baseline, we've seen what everyone's kind of doing, and we can iterate and go a level of complexity deeper next time.
Do you worry about rushing off in front of the audience? So, I mean, you, for example, used the Xbox One controller and the Xbox One game analogy. Like, you put an Xbox One controller into the average person in the world's hands, they still freak out, right? It still makes no sense. And dual analog sticks, all this stuff, there's a lot of inherited information there. Do you worry that, that you might get out in front of the VR audience, that you might be making, Generation 3 at the point where the game audience is still like just getting into VR, or do you think it's going to move really fast?
So when I talk about that, I'm talking about like the curve. The curve I'm talking about is not that steep. It is like gradual things. It's like, for example, right now when you build a computer game and you want to pull up a menu or quit, you hit escape. That is just like a vast majority of people, even computer users, understand escape is there. It's at the point in VR right now where we have the trigger and then you hit the menu button, which is kind of the menu which pulls up the briefcase so you can eat an exit burrito, right? But we even have to tutorialize what the menu button is, where it is, and how to hit it, right? Because that's how essentially early we are. And that's like one of the few tutorial things that we do at the very start of the game. Yeah. But as people get more comfortable with the actual devices themselves, having to explain in great detail where a menu button is going to be a thing that we don't have to worry about as much. Yeah, So it's not that we're going to be like, whoa, the next version is going to require 20 hours to understand what's actually going on. It's that gradual curve that as users get more comfortable with the technology, they'll be able to adapt.
It's actually interesting. Like if you think of a static amount, of, like a fixed time to fun for onboarding in a game, if we can assume that people know where a menu button is, you can remove that from the equation and just add something else in that time block. So you can go one level above that, and then once that becomes a paradigm and a standard, you could do something one level above that, because all the implicit assumptions, like you said, like you don't have to teach people you have a keyboard on your computer at this point, whereas we do in VR. You do have to teach these kind of basic. Here's where.
And so for players, what you're explaining right now is that when we hold an Xbox controller or a PlayStation controller, we know that the triangle or that the Y button will switch the guns. Like we know that right trigger is the thing that shoots. We know that clicking the right analog stick is going to bring up the map or like ping the system. Like these are things that we've inherited through.
If you're playing a competently designed game, yes.
Right.
Yeah,
unless you switch your controls to some weird ass.
But it's even simpler than that. Like right now, what we're thinking about is, does the user know that there's bumpers actually on the controller, right?
Right.
And those things are just going to come from actually using the technology and getting more comfortable with it. And then some paradigms will essentially follow.
But also, you don't even have tracked controllers, for example, yet in the Oculus world. And so being unable to look down at the untracked Xbox controller that ships with it means that you can't call out dynamic information on top of it. Where, right now in the PlayStation world, you could overlay any kind of piece of information on top of the controller and kind of add more complexity via visuals rather than like inherent memory of how the mapping of the controller is built when you're visually blocked from being able to see your hand.
Yeah, which is what we're doing in Volume Coda. Like the controller shows what is happening in the game.
Right. So
because we have the controller in the game.
You have a one-to-one ability to kind of tutorialize visually, whereas if you have to rely on some kind of natural mapping that you are supposed to inherently understand, then who knows if they got it or didn't, what their background is.
Yeah. So one last question, something that's interesting me at the moment, because we're seeing the gradation of different kind of VR experiences. So you have the mobile VR experience, the console VR experience, the high-end PC VR experience. I'm interested in do you guys think that this technology comes together, or do you think it continues to distance and you have very different kinds of VR experiences, or do you think that everything's going to pull towards one kind of perfect point?
So I guess I have a theory that mobile, and when I say mobile I mean untethered, could be self-contained units or slot-in phone units. That mobile and tethered desktop units, those two ecosystems of computing and VR will continue to have kind of like this playhead style follow of technology curve. So you'll always have this like enthusiast driven, very high end, you need to be tethered to a $2,000 PC type of deal.
Sure.
And then that will kind of be leading the way as far as frame rates, resolutions, etc. And that there'll be a mobile version that kind of catches that tail, and that mobile version will exceed Vive level, quality and experience once it passes that threshold, and it'll continue to have that kind of gap, which I think is important to maintain. It's not all going to become a singular experience, but that's kind of how I see that.
The form factor you see always being separate. So there would always be untethered and untethered experience. You don't see any.
I mean, until we completely advance. I think until we completely advance from needing the tether. But I foresee in the next couple of years you're going to have tethered and untethered, and they're going to advance at around the same rate. And so just over time, mobile will hit that mark of at or exceeding current tethered quality within let's say 2 years or whatever that is.
Yeah, it's like the same thing with like PC and mobile. Mobile was kind of building up a feature set of things, and essentially as over time, less and less people needed the need for buying a PC and just ended up having mobile. And another thing that we think is going to happen is we think that there's right now with high-end VR, we think that having hands, being able to stand up, move around a little bit, we think that's like the benchmark for good VR. We think that's what the core ingredients are to make that work. You need to be positionally tracked. You need to be able to reach out in the world and interact with it. And I think that mobile is going to work its way to that point. And then there's going to be that inflection point where it is going to have all the pieces to the puzzle to make it a very, very interesting place to develop content. And we think Job Simulator is also like a perfect thing that's going to roll into that. We've been kind of designing it with that in mind of like, what does mobile look like? Kind of what computing power will mobile have when essentially all the pieces wrap together.
Yeah. So. And no one would argue that mobile won't have hand tracking and positional tracking. It's a question of when. So the idea was to shoot ahead of the curve, build for the high end, which will mean that as long as we can get the performance right, we'll have a great piece of content that people know and love that is recognizable for the first units that have the mobile units that have that set of hardware that is needed, which is hands and positional tracking.
All right, so thanks so much, Alex Schwartz and Devin Reimer from Owlchemy Labs for being on this week's show. Job Simulator is available on your VR platforms. There you go. All right, Mike, now that our guests are gone, we've been good hosts. What are you playing?
Well, I've been playing Overwatch along with, I believe, most of the internet. I think me and the internet have been playing Overwatch.
I think Blizzard has stated at least 8 million other people are with you.
Good.
Are with
so
you
I should put this in context because I've not talked about multiplayer games much on the show. I'm not a multiplayer guy at all. Like even
also explain what Overwatch is too.
Well, I'll get to that.
Okay.
So I'm not a multiplayer guy. Even with good friends, I've never gotten. I'm known amongst my group of friends for getting very excited about the idea of a multiplayer game, playing it for half an hour and then getting bored. It's happened with me with lots of games, like co-op games, and I've wasted friends a lot of money by getting them to buy games that I'm into, and then kind of getting bored very quickly. Overwatch so far, I've been playing it for a few hours. So Overwatch is a first-person shooter, class-based, kind of in the Team Fortress mold, I guess. But the big interesting thing about it is that they've kind of gone overboard with the characters. They have, I think it's either 20, is it 21, 22 or 23, it's somewhere in that range. Let me get the art book, I'll count the characters. No. And it's and each character is genuinely unique. Like, it's not just here are 4 tanks or here are 4 medics. It's unique, interesting twists on. You almost feel like you're playing 20 odd different kinds of first person shooters. And that's what's making it very fresh and exciting for me, because I'm bouncing around. I'm getting into a character, I'm learning how to play them, I'm enjoying 20 minutes and a couple of games playing as that character, and then I'm getting bored of that and going, I'm going to learn something else, and slowly but surely kind of learning enough characters for enough different situations that I can jump around on the fly, and if my team is in need of support, then I'll flip into my favorite support character. But there are still many characters I've not actually tried playing as yet, so it's really good for that. It's really, the progression system doesn't really care about characters as far as I can tell that much, and I'm not being incentivized to do it, but I'm just interested. I'm interested in different characters, or I'll be playing, I'll be playing in a level, playing in a fight, and there'll be a character who I've never seen before come up to me. I'll be intrigued by who that is, and then it's very good at teaching you that. So it's really, really good. I love how it does story. I love how it does kind of the personalities of these characters. I love the manner in which it's genuinely, and I think I've seen this as a criticism, it's genuinely quite light in detail in terms of its mechanics. Like, it's basically, you can run around and look, and then you've got 5 abilities, and one of those abilities is the gun you're holding. Sometimes 2 of those abilities are the gun you're holding, but a different ability from that. You're not running around picking up different guns or ammo. You have one gun, you have one set of abilities, but because of that, it feels, very unique based on which characters you're choosing. And I'm having an amazing time with it, which I wasn't anticipating. I was very much one of those people who was brought in by all the amazing trailers and just really enjoying the world building and the tone and the look of it. And I was very pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed the game itself. You've not played it yet, right?
Nope. And I had no interest because I'm not into Team Fortress 2. But this is Blizzard, right? It's classic. This is a classic Blizzard situation where I had zero interest in Hearthstone, and then I played Hearthstone when it launched, and I've played Hearthstone pretty much ever since then, and given them plenty of coin in the in between space. One of the things that surprised me about Overwatch is when it came out, it's $60. And I was like, oh, I thought this was going to be free to play. I don't know where my brain took that or why that, but sold 8 million units, so clearly they made the right
value for
move.
money thing. I mean, the value for money is there. I went out today and traded in my regular copy for a super special edition because I wanted this enormous statue and an art book and stuff. But the value of the kind of the $60 game, I'm not sure how many maps there are. I think there might be. It feels like there's maybe about 8, something like that. Couple of different game modes, but where the variety and the value comes in is in those characters, because they are genuinely unique and they all have a really interesting quirk to them. So it's so, for example, Lucio, I think I'm pronouncing that right, who's this Brazilian DJ, who's one of the kind of the medic stand-ins. He has his abilities are he has a dubstep gun that he can shoot baddies with, and that's fine. But more interestingly, you have control of his headphones, so you can change the soundtrack, the music you're listening to as you play, and different pieces of music, the 2 different genres of music. One makes everyone who's near you run faster, and one heals them. And you can flip between that on your headphones. You can also amp up your headphones, which gives a temporary boost to that ability. And you can various other kind of superpowers and stuff based on that. So what you get is it's that Portal feeling. If I'm playing as him, I'm playing this really interesting kind of puzzle mechanic where I'm gauging what my team needs, and I'm flipping between having different kind of ability. And that's where that value comes in, because I feel like I've played a first-person shooter with a really interesting music mechanic. But that's just one of 20-odd different characters who each have their own take, different relations with the environment. Some characters can fly. Lucio can wall run, but others characters can't. So it genuinely does feel like I've gotten like to be a marketer for it. Like, it's 20 games for one, and that's where the value comes for me, is as I'm slowly uncovering these characters, as situations arise where I'm like, I need to play as a tank in this scenario. Oh, I've not tried that tank yet, and kind of learning a new character. It's great, and the tutorial's great. The tutorial takes nothing for granted. The tutorial literally explains to you that you're playing in first person, and how to move the thumbstick in order to move around. Like, it's very, very basic, and then very quickly escalates. It's just really good, and it's one of those games where the beauty of it is it looks really simplistic. It looks really, in terms of its mechanical depth, in terms of its aesthetic even, it looks really clean and straightforward. But that's a testament to how good the underlying design is. And it's one of those games that I think I'm definitely going to be ripping off for years. And I think most game designers are going to be finding stuff in there, and you're going to see bits of that game leak into lots of other games, I think. Because it's it's just so refreshing. It's I think it's been a really good couple of months for FPS. You know, that and Doom have both just come out and been really new and exciting. And if you know, I'm a fan of the FPS genre, but like, it got a bit muddy and boring and corridory for a while there, and it feels like people have remembered that FPSs can be fun and over the top. It's nice.
Well, there's a company called 3M, and their tagline was always, you know, we don't make a lot of the products you buy. We make a lot of the products you buy better. And Blizzard has always been, to me, we don't make a lot of the genres that you buy. We just take a lot of the genres you like and make them better. And that seems to be the Blizzard thing. They don't create genres. They take genres and then extract, whether it's academically or however we want to put this, but they go, how do we make this better for a larger audience? And when Hearthstone first came out, you saw the exact same criticisms that you're seeing about Overwatch right now. Oh, it's not deep enough. It's not complex enough. It's like, yeah, but it's selling like hotcakes. And as much as I would love to say something along the lines of like, well, that's just the Blizzard brand. Like people see Blizzard on something, they just gobble it up. It doesn't matter what it is. Could be the worst game ever.
I've seen a lot of people saying that on Twitter, and it's not. I mean, I've played Blizzard games before, but I was never a Warcraft fan. I was never a Starcraft fan. Like I've not played. I genuinely haven't played Hearthstone, which is a massive gap in my awareness. I do need to play Hearthstone at some point. But no, I didn't. If anything, the Blizzard name was something where I went, oh, they don't really make the kinds of games I play. No, it's nonsense. I think it's just genuinely is just an amazing game, and I'm a fan of it. Like in a way that I'm trying to think of the last IP that launched, probably Assassin's Creed actually. Like Assassin's Creed was a game that I instantly became, I'm a fan of this. I need to know everything about it. I need to buy every T-shirt. I need to do this. I need to do that. And Overwatch it's making me feel that way again, which is super rare for me to get really obsessively excited about something. So no, I'm there. I'm, you know, the first DLC they release, I'll purchase day one. The first, you know, opportunity I get to get more of that Overwatch stuff, I'm there. I love it.
So in terms of genres, with obsessive followings, I have been playing The Witcher: Blood and Wine. I love.
It would be easier at this point just to ask you if you're not playing The Witcher.
I am playing The Witcher, and the expansion is way more than I was expecting it to be. For starters, complete UI overhaul, total full UI overhaul. It's smooth too, which is like, it's one thing to have a UI overhaul and it's still like clicky and slow and everything. Nope, full UI overhaul, incredibly smooth. Everything is CD Projekt Red leaving the game at the end better than what they put out there. It's taking that moment of like, okay, so this is gonna be our biggest game to date. How do we leave a good legacy behind on it? And that UI overhaul is absolutely one of those elements. And then within the game itself, really clever expansion content in there. Characters are acting as you would expect them to. It does the classic Witcher thing of introducing people who I was never into the series prior to Wild Hunt, but Geralt comes across people and he's like, yes, I know this person and this thing happened, and I'm not going to bother explaining to you the entire background of why I know these people, because that's life. And my job in this is to just go through the journey. I am not here to do exposition for you and add all this other stuff into it. So plenty of characters get introduced that have relationships with characters that you know from the series, and the cutscenes have I don't want to say new. Everything runs smoother. So like, not only is the UI smoother, the game itself is running far cleaner than it had been previously. And then the cutscenes just have a bunch of stuff where you're like, oh, are you guys testing 2077 stuff? out like here? Are you doing a couple things? Because there's animations in there that were not part of the original game. They're having interactions in there that you didn't see in Witcher 3 itself. There's a bunch of stuff going on that's like, oh, okay. It's the stuff that reminds me of when we're sort of doing experimenting things to see if it'll work in the future. Like that's the stuff that I'm seeing out of Blood and Wine. And
makes sense, doesn't it? To do a bit of R&D kind of in your DLC. Makes sense. Is that paid for DLC, I assume?
Yes.
So is that and is that, how much is it? Like $20. What kind of scale is it? It sounds like it's very worth it, right?
It is.
Sounds like
it's a whole new.
deal.
Yeah, it's a whole new land, a whole new story, plenty of content, and a whole new area to explore. It's gorgeous. It's wine country, so you're away from the dark, bleak everything.
Oh, I see. So like vineyards and very Italian kind of feel to it. Yeah.
Yep. And the it does that amazing Skyrim-esque thing where there is the castle off in the distance, and you spend the next hour or two, like the first hour of two of the expansion, just slowly making your way to that castle off in the distance, and it's just brilliant. And then it's in the mountains, and it's beautiful. It is worth it. If you have enjoyed your time with Witcher 3, go ahead and get Blood and Wine. It is a fantastic expansion. It is a great ending to that story before CD Projekt goes on to its next thing. And then the other thing I've been playing, which you have also been playing, is Hitman Episode 3 Marrakech, which, okay, let's put this one out there. This one doesn't like you. This episode is not your hand-holding friend in any way.
I like that about it.
I don't know if I do.
So I feel like, I mean, I honestly haven't played a great deal of it yet, because for reasons that we can discuss hopefully in later shows, it's been a bit busy in Bithell Games for the last few days. We haven't done happenings at the studio for a while because we've not been able to talk about any of it. But yeah, so I've not played as much as I should. But I actually feel like it's the first point where I feel that they're making assumptions about previous experience. Both Paris and Sapienza both felt like introductory levels. They both felt like they were great, but they felt like they were not making any assumptions. Whereas this game, it's assuming that we've looped through the first few maps a few times. I kind of like that difficulty curve starting to kick in. I mean, I'm interested in how far they can push that curve before it becomes frustrating, but I like where it's at. Interestingly, the thing that's annoying me most with that episode is it's funny hearing you say about the Witcher's UI overhaul. My goodness, the performance is terrible. And it's starting to irritate me now. Like, the moment I realized this isn't cool was that now when I go and play Hitman, I always have my iPad with like a sitcom episode or something that I'm halfway watching, just for the loading screens.
The loading screens. I check Twitter now in between the loading screens.
It's not cool, because I would hope that there would be a team there who, as well as making new content, could bring some of that stuff down. I'm okay with loading screens, is fine. The frustration is how many. I know exactly what it is. It's the server calls. It's because everything's connected to the cloud, and they're doing lots of tests and checks to make sure that, I don't know what they're trying to make sure of, but they're making sure that you're online and they're doing all that stuff. That's what's slowing it down. But I just wish they could streamline that and make
especially as the levels get more difficult. So with Sapienza and Paris, I could get through the entire contract in one. Things might get a little messy, but I could get through the entire contract without a problem. In Marrakech, I must have done it 5 or 6 times before I could do it, and then there's that loading screen the minute I screw up, and that loading screen goes, and I immediately grab for my phone and start checking Facebook and Twitter and seeing, like, have we gotten any emails or anything like that. That's problematic.
I remember the amount of effort we put in with, and I mean, Volume is obviously a much simpler game, but like the effort we took to make sure that like a death was an instantaneous respawn, just trimming that down as much as we could. So it's, I mean, now it's a few milliseconds. There is definitely a pause when you die, but like, you know, that trial and error. And in Hitman, that's the fun stuff. Trial and error, trying to find the really cheeky way of doing things. I also noticed with this one, I don't know if it's just the specificity of exactly how I played the first time, a lot of the sight lines are a bit harder to judge than they have been in previous ones. There's less absolutely safe areas, or I was getting spotted and it wasn't broken, you know, I worked out, oh, that guy saw me, but like it's much harder to gauge some of that stuff, especially around the market kind of areas and things. So yeah, I'm with you. I think I'm noticing it more because I'm dying more, and like I said, I like the difficulty, but that loading time, it is a problem. And I'm hoping that as time goes on, they iterate on that, because the game's still brilliant. Like, I love the game. I love the tone shift. I love that this one feels like a spy movie. Like this one feels like, and there's you know, I'm not. This isn't original. I think I saw it on a videogamer.com video talking about like how the stakes are increasing. So, you know, the first one is just about killing a couple of people. The second one is you're starting to get a bit of political. This is like literally you're breaking into embassies and stuff. So it's becoming, you know, more epic. I like that this one's got a bit more of a serious tone than some of the previous ones. You know, I like that variety. I like that they're shifting stuff around. In every aspect, it's great. It's just, I just want that technical stuff to be looked at.
Yeah, the other thing that this episode is definitely about is there isn't you don't have those clear moments where someone is alone and you can just grab them.
Yeah.
And that's sort of showing whether the distraction mechanics are working as cleanly as intended. And that's, I still don't know how I'm feeling about that, because there's definitely, because people are now clustered in groups of 2 or more. And so getting one of them pulled away, maybe I just haven't found the easiest mechanic to do that. But
I'm with you.
Throwing the coins and throwing bricks or doing that type of stuff to get them away from the group is becoming a lot more difficult.
And the lack of feedback in terms of like, who are you going to attract with that? Like because it's, you know, it seems random. I'm sure it's not random, but like, you know, you can throw a coin and you don't know which person's going to go and get it, which messes things up.
I threw a coin in front of a guy and it pulled the person who was one floor down from us up. And, you know, that's it's fine. There's so much complexity going on in Hitman. There's a level of acceptance I have on those types of things. Because, for example, when Sapienza came out, I think for the first week or something like that, it wasn't tracking the achievements that you made on each level unless you went back to the main menu and then reloaded back in. So it was just this technical hiccup in there. So I accept a level of technical hiccup, but when it's starting to get this challenging, and you start
to feel those lines more, don't you?
Yeah.
I definitely, I'm being clumsier in this one, and I like you, you know, part of me thinks, well, you know, keep playing it, you're going to find that one moment where you could do that. I don't want to give specific examples, but there was definitely one specific character who I was, you know, instructed by one of the opportunity notifications that was the dude that I had to steal the clothes of, and that dude simply is never alone.
The poster guy?
Yeah, the poster guy.
Oh my god, I must have tracked him for 20 minutes.
I did, and you know, you can do distractions to take him off his path. But with me, I found that I was doing that, and he was telling me off. He was going, "Don't, I know what you're doing," or something. So that's the classic example of like, there must be something I'm missing there, and I'll find it. But it feels like, that difficulty spike has happened, and this is the other side of the episodic thing, is that if this were a traditional game, 10 levels, you'd get through it with your teeth gritted and you'd be like, no, two great levels, one that's been a bit tricky, let's see what the next one is. But because of the episodic thing, this is now how Hitman is for a month. So it's interesting. It's interesting that we've seen two very two levels that both of us, I think, have had a really great time on, and this one where it's like a bit more, and it might just be the difficulty. And I feel like, this time next week I might be talking about how stupid I was being for not spotting all the stuff I now know is in there. But I'm feeling I want to play it some more and get a feel for it. And I mean, the problem has been that because Overwatch is just so smooth and fast, and I can put that disc in my PlayStation and be having a great experience in 2 minutes flat. That's been getting more time from me this week. But that will shift, and I'm sure the other side of E3 I'll be playing a lot of Hitman.
Yeah, there's certainly elements of Marrakech that I still know I haven't found, because after I finish the contract the first time around, I'll go and look at the achievements.
The campaigns and stuff, yeah.
And there's a whole section that I clearly have not found yet, and I went exploring and I still couldn't find it. And so there's still plenty of content for me to discover in Marrakech, and I just haven't found it yet. And maybe by doing that, I'll get better.
It'll click for you.
I'll get good at the Hitman. But there is a curve that has occurred between Paris and Sapienza, which were very airy, very people on their own, to Marrakech, where it's a clutter and everything's cluttered. But it's great. Now it's time for reader mail. Reader mail. Yeah.
I think you may be misjudging our audience. I don't think the young people listen to this podcast.
The Ootses? No Ootses?
The Oots do not listen to this now.
Oh, I like the Oots. This one comes from Prince R on the YouTubes.
Okay.
Quote, 2 birds with 1 stone. Include an invert Y-axis option in volume coda. That way, you're a champion for the inverters by being probably the first game to include it, and also Mike gets to make his experiment for the purposes of an actual release. Plus, if you do it so bluntly, you'll probably end up being the last game to include it too. So that's got to be like double the prestige, right?
I tell you what we'll do. We're going to put a feature into Coda that if you stand on the spot and shake your head from side to side for 20 minutes flat, we'll invert the Y for you. If you're still standing up. No.
Come on.
Do it.
Just this once.
It would actually kill people.
We will be the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the end of this. Think you will be in every design book from now until the end of time.
As a cautionary tale.
But you'll be in history. You'll be famous.
This sounds like this should be to music. This should be like this is the bad guy. This is Ursula offering to take the Little Mermaid's voice. That's all.
You got your looks, your pretty face. And don't forget the importance of invert Y-axis. Yeah.
Next question.
Aww. All right. This one comes to us from Kyle H. What genre do you think stands the most to gain from developments in VR? Also,
that's interesting.
The immediate response was dating sims. Next question.
I'm with the chaps from Owlchemy earlier in the podcast. I think the great genres of VR are going to be genres we don't know about yet. I think there is still this mistake that a lot of people are making of seeing VR as just another screen, basically, just another viewer. And it's not. It's architecture. It's going to a place. I know with the stuff that we're doing, it's as much about creating the place to go as it is to creating what you do when you get there. So I think a lot of the old kind of traditional genres don't make sense in VR. I think you can totally be a pedant and find links. If you look at, say, Job Simulator, you can definitely see there the history of adventure games, for example. It owes something to Monkey Island. It has that adventure game kind of mechanic. It's about combining items and getting outcomes. But is it an adventure game? Not really. It doesn't have that feel. It's a completely different experience. So no, I genuinely think that it's like saying, you know, which genres of radio show will most make the jump to theatre. It's a different medium, and I think we're going to do really interesting work collectively, the industry, and I'm not sure. I don't think anything. I think the obvious ones in the short term are your strategic games, your puzzle games, your adventure games. Those are the things that kind of most immediately you can kind of draw from, but give it a couple of years and I think we'll have invented some new things.
I'll go with the tabletop experience. That is the genre I think has the most to gain from that. In the same breath, the tabletop world now has 3D printing, so the barrier to entry in tabletop gaming has also been reduced in terms of the physical realm. So there's this amazing sort of two plot lines going on at the moment. One, we've got 3D printing, which makes creating characters for those tabletop games plausible without spending a lot of money. And then we also have something like VR, where I think of an experience like Armello. Like I would love to see Armello in VR. Just having a board game in VR where the board is in front of me and the environment is based off of my character or what's going on or what setting I'm in, so that the scene around me transitions, but the board in front of me is this static concept. That's what I would love to see. Same thing goes for, think of every Halo or Wing Commander, where they're doing the mission briefing, and the mission briefing is projected in front of them on the table. Yeah, I want to do that.
Nice.
You know, just having Battlestar Galactica sort of RTS going on, Homeworld. That stuff, of course, you would have to be standing on a pedestal. You could not be standing in space. But that's the stuff that I am excited to see. That Tony Stark, touch it, grab it, move it, type
shake it. That's a Daft Punk song, right?
Yeah, but just that experience is the one.
I'm with you. I think that's we're playing with some stuff in that area ourselves. Like, I think there's definitely legs to that as kind of the first steps into VR. I think that will work really well.
Yeah, and as much as I would love to see, as much as I would like to see, horror or FPSs do that type of stuff. FPS has a lot of challenges, in the VR space. Movement being key to that, and then I'm thinking of the most recent video, which is the girl playing the zombie shooter game, and she starts freaking out and like curling up in a ball, and they come over and tell her like it's okay. And the weird thing is that the video's kind of positioned in such a way, laugh at this girl for freaking out while playing VR. And it's like, no, that's the last thing we want to be doing right now. The last
doesn't
thing...
sell the experience.
Yeah,
give us hundreds of dollars and we will upset you.
Yeah, like let's not mock people as they are learning this new thing. That is a concern. But yeah, what genre do I think stands the most to gain from developments in VR right now? Tabletop games. I think tabletop games have a lot to gain from that, and it's a very helpful transition from taking them from being tabletop experiences to that. And then, as the Owlchemy guy said, bringing multiplayer into that. That's incredibly exciting.
Multiplayer is amazing, and they were absolutely right. The idea of, even if you just take a sphere that represents the head and two little spheres that represent the controllers. The example I always give is I got a demo the Facebook office from Callum and Oculus, so who I know pretty well, and have been out with a few times at events, and and he was in a completely different room in the building, and I recognized him just from those 3 spheres moving around. He just had the right swagger. He was about the right height. He was there. And I just remember thinking, like, how powerful that would be, if me and my partner are, long distance away from each other, just being able to be in a room with her, just to be able to, do a Skype style chat, just talk to her while actually having a sense of her physical presence. That would be incredibly cool. Like that would be a powerful experience. And I do think that was the point where I understood why Facebook bought Oculus. Put it that way.
If you have a burning question about games, game development, or just about the complexities of the universe, you can send those questions to us via contact@BithelGames.com. That's contact@BithelGames.com, through the YouTube comments of this show, or on Twitter by pinging @Mike Bithell or @Slawinski, or our AI @VolumeGame. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bithell Games Podcast. We can always use your support, so please provide reviews and 5 stars on iTunes, likes and subscribes on YouTube, and positive reinforcement on whatever other platform you're hearing this show on whenever possible. This podcast was produced by Jonathan Downen. We'll be back next week. Then comes E3. We have no idea what we're going to do during that time. Thanks again to our guests from Owlchemy Labs for stopping on by and talking to us about the VR space. I am Alexander Slawinski. Thanks again, and get in the last word, Mike.
Incoming.